Hi, welcome to the Slava Heroyam podcast, episode 6. It's just me again, and what I have planned for today is to promote another Ukrainian nonprofit for Ukraine in the military side of things. Then we'll talk about some of the people we've lost over the past week. We'll catch up with an update on some of the guests that we've had on this show before. And then we're going to react to the tactical situation as presented by the YouTube channel, the military channel. I wanted to do an update with Kings and Generals. They're my favorite tactical situation, but it seems they haven't come out with their monthly update yet. They must have a lot to cover. Recently, they did cover Operation Spiderweb pretty well, but there was a situation tactically where it looked like Russia might be breaking through at one point, but now we think it was all a trap. I talked about this a little bit last week, but we're going to talk about it more today. I'll react to it as an air battle manager from some guys who know the ground a little bit better than me. I also want to talk a little something non-Ukraine today, and that is this destruction of this Venezuelan drug boat, as we have U.S. forces and fleets headed that way. And I want to kind of deconstruct from my point of view what that all means. I talk about 50 states for Ukraine, and it's sort of a fun donation effort in that it's sort of a competition between states to see who can give the most. But it's a nonprofit organization, 50 states for Ukraine. They build up donations for vehicles for different units that are requiring new vehicles. It's fundraising for evacuation vehicles for the heroes defending Ukraine. Each state will sponsor one Ukrainian battalion to get them an ambulance, basically. Join the battalion or start one in your state. Right now, we have one for New Jersey, Arizona, Utah, Delaware, Florida, California, and Texas. And California and Texas had a competition going on, and they raised $23,000 between the two states. The aid went to the 112 assault drone unit, and then and they got escape vehicles, ambulances. Here was the other one, the 42nd NFAO convoy under the model shield. So this is a great website. You're saving lives when you donate to this. If you don't believe in donating to the war effort, you can at least donate to getting the soldiers that get wounded the heck out of there. Please, we'll be doing that every podcast where we represent or we talk about at least one Ukrainian aid organization. All right, on to the next topic. Let's talk about this incident that's being promoted. Here we have this alleged drug runner. Marco Rubio shared this. It's two different angles of it. So obviously it was being followed for a while. And then boom, it gets blown up. Now, what I want to know about this is my gut reaction to this was similar to a reaction that I had when everyone kind of freaked out because it got into the news that Russian Bear bombers were flying near Alaska and doing practice runs. And I thought to myself, that happens all the time. And why are we freaking out about this now? And it's because the war in Ukraine was going on and everyone's freaking out about nuclear weapons blackmail, basically. And that's that is probably the big propaganda item to get over is nuclear blackmail. So this is similar in that I thought, boy, this was my gut reaction that we blow up boats like this all the time. And all the time is not really normal. What happens is that you have these guys, we detect them, we figure out who they really are using our air assets and naval assets and assets from other countries like Colombia and Ecuador and those that are willing to help us. We identify these guys and we typically send the Coast Guard after them. And most of the time, the Coast Guard interdicts them, makes arrests, gets all the drugs. But there is the occasional one that will not stop, tries to run. Now, You can take them out with non-lethal force. They're often trained to disable their engines, that kind of thing. But I would bet money that there has been some runners that we just outright destroyed. The same thing happens on the border with the U.S. Border Patrol. I have a friend in that. Normally they try to make an arrest and the shooting starts. Sometimes across the river, sometimes on our side of the river, and that's cartel reaction. It is when you definitely have a bad guy, or a lot of times they don't want to go down without a fight. So the way I interpret this boat situation with Rubio sharing it is to drum up the idea that there is an enemy to be fought against, one that is unusual and new. And even if it's an unusual way to destroy people, the thing to keep in mind, the thing that's important to understand is that it is not new. Our war on drugs this way is not new. The fact that they are showing you that they blew up a boat, that's new. This would normally not make big news, even if there was a runner. It's making news because there's a fleet headed down that way to kind of intimidate Venezuela. But is that just the end goal? I don't think so. So that's a little bit of a thing that gets away from Ukraine, but the tactics of doing that, of creating an enemy, that's something that other authoritarians would do. Which, by the way, in the news, everyone may be aware that Xi Jinping and Putin and the leader of India and a bunch of other autocrats, guy from Belarus, they all had to beg to get together, and Trump wasn't invited. Why is that significant? Because you are seeing, you have two ways to interpret that. You can look at all those countries get together and go, oh, how nice. All these countries are friends, making deals together. Or you can look at it as a threat to just Ukraine, that they're all going to team up on Ukraine. Or you can look at it for what it really is. A dwindling of Western democracy, power, and influence. And essentially how all these countries, in particular Russia, they consider themselves at war with us already. So how do we get out of that situation? That's not the focus of this channel. But what is the focus of this channel is to realize that the Ukraine war is a worldwide affair. It is not an affair between two countries that aren't of our concern. It is very much of our concern. So here's another reason why it is of our concern. There was a 2-year-old and her mother who died in Kyiv this previous week, and I really wanted to remember their names. I'm going to put a graphic for the recorded version of this right here, and it'll list several names that we should remember. I had a conversation with Zarina Zabriskie, who is currently in Kherson, and she tells me that in that particular town, there's at least 10 to 14 people injured every day from drone attacks. They lose on average about 2 people every day to death, and that's from drones, artillery, and missiles. And that's just in one smaller town. In Kyiv is under constant bombardment lately. Odessa has been under bombardment. I might also put a map here that I've seen before of all the different cities that are under bombardment. This is after, an ultimatum from Trump that meant absolutely nothing. But I want to concentrate on these names, and these are the people that we've lost since we talked last. If I can do that, I'll do that every show as well, so that we can remember the individual people that we've lost in the previous week in Ukraine. Kind of like if you're a Texas Aggie, you do a Silver Taps. We'll do a Silver Taps for Ukraine. So I'll let that pause for a minute. I'm sorry if you're on Spotify, you won't be able to see those names. But if you are listening on Spotify, go to the YouTube version of this, and you'll be able to see the names. And next week I'll do a better job of being prepared to read those out. But the one that has struck me is the face, not the name, of this 2-year-old and this giant teddy bear. Another story that struck me is one of the people lost last week had a dog, and the dog was sitting by the rubble of the home in Kyiv and just howling because master wasn't coming home. So that's what we're dealing with, the loss of real people. Russia's losing factories, military targets, things of that nature. And if they are losing real people, they're inside those centers of gravity, mostly big time targets, oil refineries, but also drone factories, weapons factories, things of that nature. So we've done our big time news. We've done our aside to the boat attack, which, by the way, I'm looking at it as a guy who AWACS used to be very particular on that mission. And if we're interested in hearing more about the Venezuela situation, I might have a few people that could join me on the podcast. I don't know if they would want to, but there are experts that I know that are have dealt with the counter drug mission for a long time, and we can talk more about what's unusual or usual about that. I want to get to the primary event for this particular podcast, and that is to react to the military show. So if I maximize this,
Russia just can't seem to take Pokrovsk, and it really has been trying. For most of the Ukraine war, this vital city has been in Russia's crosshairs because of its logistical importance to Ukraine and the role it serves as a key Donetsk fortress. But time and time again, Russia attacks and Russia fails.
All right, so you see here we have artillery, infantry, tanks. Donetsk, the city is the main city. So this city that they're trying to take is outside Donetsk. Donetsk has been a Russian and separatist stronghold for a long time. But that city is completely ruined. I would say 90% of the people that live there that would have had a greater issue with this war has left and went west. That has been since 2014. Donetsk was the center of a large propaganda campaign to say that the Euromaidan revolution that got rid of the Ukrainian corrupt oligarchs was more of a coup. And so you can see the power of propaganda in that in an entire city, what was left was everyone who kind of believed that narrative. So it's a stronghold. So that's where the Russians are launching from. And it would be extremely difficult for Ukraine to take that city, even if they had full support. So, a matching army, they would do things to go around it, bypass it.
August 28th, Russia pushed toward Pokrovsk using an armored column that it hoped would steamroll into the city. Ukraine had other ideas. As the Russian tanks pushed forward, Ukraine lured them into a trap. HIMARS turned those tanks to ashes, and another Pokrovsk assault has collapsed. On September 1st, United 24 media reported that Ukraine's airborne forces, with support from a deadly HIMARS strike, had successfully routed a Russian armored column that was trying to push its way deeper into the Pokrovsk region. Though the report came at the beginning of September, Ukraine's deadly HIMARS trap was actually sprung a few days before, on August 28th. It all started when members of Ukraine's Ivan Franko group, which brigade, discovered a Russian mechanized assault group traveling about 6 miles behind the front lines in the Pokrovsk region. The tanks had done well to get that far without being spotted before, but as they would soon find out, getting 6 miles behind enemy lines doesn't mean much when you end up being blown to smithereens. The Ivan Franko group watched and calculated. The group discovered that the armored column consisted of 7 vehicles, including several tanks and a few infantry fighting vehicles. Accompanying the tanks and infantry fighting vehicles were 100 soldiers, some of whom were riding as part of the convoy on motorcycles. That may seem like a strange choice of vehicle, but it's one that Russia has been utilizing for much of 2025. Bikes provide Russia's soldiers with the speed and agility needed to avoid Ukraine's drones, the logic goes. Whether that's actually true is up for debate. Plus, the troops riding motorbikes are having to sacrifice the armor that tanks and stronger vehicles provide, meaning that a drone catching up is a death sentence. Still, the bikes were in play, the Ivan Franko group.
So we talked about a few things. I'll hide this for a second. We talked about HIMARS, which is completely U.S. Given. And that is something that has provided Ukraine a range advantage in artillery, which they would not otherwise have. It was the gift that allowed Ukrainian forces to complete their offensive in 2022, where they liberated Kherson and a bunch of other territory. But they will need constant resupply for the artillery shells and missiles. HIMARS are basically artillery missiles. And it was a garage sale system, so it really cost us very little to nothing, and we get more by making more missiles for those. The motorbike things are interesting. Let's get back to it.
Discovered, as were tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and a large enough collection of troops that could cause serious damage if allowed to get near the Pokrovsk defenses. Something had to be done. In a Telegram post, the Ivan Franko group revealed Ukraine's response to this discovery. The crew of the Ivan Franko group, in cooperation with the HIMARS team, inflicted devastating losses on the enemy's assault armored group, which ultimately could not reach the forward positions of the 79th Air Assault Brigade and was completely defeated, the group said in a statement. The enemy will continue to try to carry out meaty assaults on our positions, the group concluded. But IFG is always on the alert and will gladly send everyone to the Kobzon's concert with the help of your drones, provided by the Sternenko community. In other words, Russia can keep trying to take Pokrovsk, but Ukraine will make them pay every time. United 24 provides more details about what Ukraine just pulled off. It says that the Ivan Franko group helped to coordinate a pair of HIMARS strikes that devastated the Russian column. The first of these strikes hit the column while it was in motion. HIMARS precision came into play here, as the system's ability to attack moving targets was enough to send massive ripples of confusion, along with a huge explosion, ripping through the column. This first strike ground the column to a halt, allowing the Ivan Franko group's drone operators to unleash a small horde of the first-person view, or FPV drones, to engage the soldiers and vehicles that hadn't been taken out by the initial HIMARS strike. Once those drones had done their work, Ukraine followed up with a second HIMARS strike, obliterating what remained of a group of soldiers that only moments earlier would have been feeling confident, having already traveled so deep behind the lines. Russia would have loved the opportunity to issue a denial, to claim that this attack never took place and that Ukrainian soldiers are lying about taking out an entire armored column. But as is so often the case in a war where Ukraine has constantly used social media and its own recordings to counter Russian disinformation, there is a video of the strike. And it proves that Ukraine did exactly what the Ivan Franko group says it did. Published on YouTube by Militarny, the video lasts for about 3 minutes and shows most of the HIMARS strike as it happened. We see initial footage of Russia's armored column, presumably shot by one of the Ivan Franko group's reconnaissance drones, stationed so far above the column that no Russian could see that Ukraine was onto them. A few seconds pass, then it happens. A massive explosion sends dust and smoke hurtling into the sky as the first HIMARS strike hits its mark. The two vehicles caught up in the blast disappear into the massive plume. The surviving vehicles attempt to scurry away, driving at pace away from the crater left in the ground by HIMARS. That's when the footage switches to views captured by the drones that the Ivan Franko group deployed when mopping up the survivors. We see an FPV drone barreling down on a vehicle before scoring a direct hit, with a reconnaissance drone capturing the attack from another angle.
Okay, so I've gone a little bit without saying anything, but I want to make it clear here that to reminder what we're watching is that for like 2 days, reports were coming in. Oh, Russia had broken through at this line, and all the tactical map people were showing this big little insert and they were explaining how this could be really bad if Russia went this way and pushed that line and enabled more of their forces to come through and all this kind of stuff. So it was brilliantly executed by, as this guy just said, on Telegram and social media to make not only the Russians feel like they were accomplishing a breakthrough, but they used social media to make the Russians feel like they were accomplishing the breakthrough as well. And I think that is just sort of strategically devious. And then, of course, they wipe out this whole group and it's all planned by the Ivan Franko group that is waiting in wait there. Let's continue.
Finally, the last minute of the video showcases the second earth-rattling HIMARS strike, taking out what was left of the column. And that was it. Russian soldiers didn't stand a chance. As soon as Ukraine spotted them, it was all over. The final casualty count was shared by Heroyam press on Ukraine's devastating HIMARS assault. Every single vehicle was destroyed as part of Ukraine's raid, with at least 50 of the 100 soldiers that were part of the column losing their lives. It's unknown how many more were injured or how many somehow managed to escape Ukraine's rockets and drones. Heroyam press also adds that the column Ukraine just took out is believed to have been recently deployed from Russia's Kursk region, explaining why such a large column was even present in a region where Russia has been relying on smaller units for the past few months. We'll talk more about that a little later in the video. Before that, we have a question to answer. Why did Ukraine choose HIMARS for this attack on Russia's armored column near Pokrovsk? It's tempting to just say watch the video of the assault and draw your own conclusions. The second HIMARS strike, captured by Ukraine's reconnaissance drones in particular, shows just how powerful this weapon is. The massive area the explosion covers shows that HIMARS is strong enough to easily take out several armored vehicles if they happen to be bunched together. But this US-made weapon deserves a more detailed examination. Made by Lockheed Martin, with the vehicle used to transport the weapon being developed by BAE Systems, HIMARS is a mobile artillery rocket system unlike anything that Russia is capable of fielding. Its distinguishing feature is that it combines raw firepower offered by a multiple launch rocket system, MLRS, with a wheeled chassis that allows HIMARS to be moved to any location where it's needed without the...
So again, it sounds impressive, but this weapon made in the 70s, Lockheed Martin, and updated in the 80s, updated in the 90s, and repairing, opening up factories again to make more ammunition for it. That money goes back to Lockheed Martin, and it's tax dollars that is already spent, is already part of the defense budget. So this is just one weapon that has made a real difference in the war. There are several others maybe we can go in the future that will make an even bigger difference.
...to be dismantled. Ukraine's HIMARS operators just have to hop into the vehicle and drive until they're in range of whatever they want to hit. Army technology says that HIMARS is capable of launching the entire range of US MLRS munitions, ranging from standard rounds to an extended range rocket that can hit targets at a longer distance. HIMARS can also fire long-range ATACMS missiles, along with the extended range version of the guided MLRS munition, all of which makes it one of the most versatile weapons that Ukraine has in its arsenal. More information comes from Army Recognition, which says that a typical HIMARS launcher can hold up to 6 of America's MLRS series of rockets or a single ATACMS missile, depending on how Ukraine needs to use it. The weapon is crewed by 3 people, with the vehicle that transports the HIMARS launcher having enough armor to protect it against small arms fire and shell splinters. However, this armor isn't the HIMARS' primary form of protection. It's the speed and maneuverability of the HIMARS vehicle that makes it such a dangerous prospect for Russia. Ukraine can hit a target with HIMARS and then bolt away from its launching point at speeds of up to 52.8 miles per hour. Even if Russia figures out where the strike came from, it's already far too late by the time it can deploy drones or arrange a counterstrike of its own. Ukraine's HIMARS will already be...
Now let's talk about how Russia would figure out where that strike would come from. Both sides of the conflict have counter-artillery radars. So this is a phased array radar, and it is called a Zoopark 1 counter-battery phased array radar, and it's just a radar on a tank. And when artillery comes in to a column like we just saw destroyed, you'll notice this column didn't have one of these. It helps to pinpoint where the artillery is coming from. Now, usually these will be embedded with a Russian artillery unit, and they will then target their artillery into the Ukrainian artillery. Well, the HIMARS maneuverability that they were just talking about prevents them from doing that. By the time this radar is figured out where the missiles have come from, the HIMARS are gone.
RS range of munitions, HIMARS can hit targets up to 27.9 miles away. This range extends to
I don't want to really
5 miles when using
spend
the
a whole lot of
extended
time
range-guided MLRS
listening to the
If HIMARS is used to launch an
capabilities.
ATACMS missile, it can hit
So
targets
let's
up to
fast forward a little
186
bit.
miles away. First Western weapons to arrive in Ukraine when it started receiving military aid from its allies, and they were vital during those early months.
Yep,
Originally, Ukraine deployed HIMARS against fixed targets, such as command centers, instead of attacking
we
Russian
don't need to
forces
do
that
a
were on
whole
the field, where it
HIMARS.
said the
Okay.
weapon allowed Ukraine to get back in the fight against Russia and its seemingly never-ending stream of soldiers and armored vehicles. Ukraine was taking back territory at a rapid pace with the help of HIMARS in 2022, the outlet said, noting the liberation of the war, particularly when it comes to taking out Russia's tanks. Even in the Pokrovsk strike we've just covered, Ukrainian drones did much of the damage, with the first HIMARS strike being used to create confusion, while the second finished off the remains of the
innovation here
Still,
is that
HIMARS
they've
is as
used
valuable in 2025
drones
as
to
it
help
was in
target their
2022.
HIMARS.
And according to the National Security Journal, Ukraine's brilliant use of this weapon is the perfect counter, but it's doing so in much lower numbers because the reality is that Putin doesn't have many more of them to spare. Just when somewhere in the region of 3,100 destroyed tanks per year. Of course, Russia is still using tanks, but it's doing so in much lower numbers because the reality.org reported that open source intelligence
In this war
analysis
they are
revealed that
because
Russia had
there's no
7,512 tanks in reserve.
But
when
if
it
you have
launched its
air
invasion.
power that can
Notice
open a
that this
mobile
is in
front,
reserve
the
and not
tank
active
is
duty.
not
By the beginning of
obsolete.
2025, that number was down by more than 50% to 3,443, with much of what was left over being the least capable of Russia's tank stock. A few months later, Novaya Gazeta reported that Russian tanks had ceased to exist as a factor on the battlefield. It also said that 2B-Or, which is a Russian news analysis YouTube channel, claims that there are only 251 tanks in Russia's reserves that are deemed to be in good condition.
All right. So what they're saying there, I'm going to pause it here, is that Russia's running out of tanks. That's good. That's why they're using motorcycles. But in my opinion, the tank is not obsolete. And the reason it's not obsolete is because this is not a mobile war. It's a stagnant front war and a war of attrition. Okay, well, that was interesting. We lost the internet for a minute. So I'm curious what that would have done to people watching. I also want to experiment with something else. Before we lost the internet, we were talking about whether the tank is relevant, and I would say that it still is. But neither side can gain air superiority to make it happen. The tank relies these days on control of the air. It's not about drones. You can deal with drones in a lot of different ways, especially as more countermeasures are made. Russia refuses to try to gain air superiority, even though they could. And because they know that if they lose too many of those forces, that a U.S. no-fly zone is without question going to happen, or at least it would have. So they won't take risks with it, risks that could win them the war very quickly. And that's a good thing. Ukraine just doesn't have the manpower and the airplanes to accomplish it. So the tank in this war is obsolete, but not necessarily future ones. We shouldn't assume that. All right, let's finish this reaction.
Meaning they need extensive repairs or are so decrepit that they can only be used for spare parts. So even having thousands of tanks in reserve doesn't mean much when most of those tanks are useless. And with Ukraine taking out the few tanks that Russia does deploy using HIMARS and drones, the question has to be asked, is it even worth Russia using tanks anymore? Perhaps not. In May, Business Insider columnist Jake Epstein claimed that Russia's army can't figure out how to use tanks to get the results that Putin demands anymore.
Release the Epstein files. There's a guy named Epstein in this. I wonder if that was fate. Different Epstein released those files.
Russia's failure to adopt a combined arms approach, in which its tank assaults are part of combination attacks that involve support from other units, is a key factor here. A lack of air superiority means Russia can't clear the way for its tanks, resulting in through the so-called grey zone under drone surveillance, followed by the buildup of forces for assault operations. Defense Blog adds to this, writing on August 31st, that Russia has been forced to adopt a new infantry doctrine due to a combination of manpower strain and the ineffectiveness of its larger assaults, thanks to Ukraine's HIMARS drones and other defensive measures. Now Russia is relying almost as heavily on drones as Ukraine. That change is accompanied by a switch to smaller units, with the columns of 30 or 60 soldiers being a thing of the past, dropped in favor of small groups of 2 or 4 soldiers that can sneak around without being ambushed by Ukraine. Perhaps August 28th was an example of Russia attempting to revert to its old strategy, an effort to sneak tanks and infantry fighting vehicles close to Pokrovsk so a larger assault could be launched. If it was, Ukraine's HIMARS ambush just reinforced the point that armored columns simply don't work anymore. Ukraine has too many measures in place to counter those columns, meaning every mechanized assault...
Again, anymore is not a good word. In this war, it is ineffective. Why? Because the air power picture is rarely considered. You get Ukraine enough air power, though, and it will be. It doesn't look like they do any more tactical talk. They just talk about stuff everyone kind of knows. So that's unfortunate. I was hoping to share Kings and Generals this time, but I'd rather have guests. We are trying to line up a few more. Sometimes you might text someone and suddenly worry that they're driving. So you don't want to bother them while they're driving. Well, I'll remove this. I want you to try to imagine having that feeling of, oh no, I texted someone while they're driving, and transplant that instead to, oh no, I've texted them while they're being chased by a drone. And that's how it was the other day, texting Zarina. She had to use the voice recording option and say, can't talk right now. Just like you would use the voice recording option in your car. I can't talk right now, but this was, I can't talk right now because I'm being chased and pursued by drones. And so I need to keep my wits about me. And that's a different reality that it would benefit us as Americans to place ourselves in. So we'll end the podcast there. and share this as a muchly edited video in the near future. So watch out for that, and we'll see you next week. Glory to the Constitution of the United States and what that represents. Slava Ukraini and Heroyam Slava.